Welcome to the Praxis Report. I'm your co-host, William Barth.
And I'm your co-host, Jonathan Brown.
And today we have an interesting podcast. John is going to discuss with us a little bit about the challenges um, of contemporary uh, left socialist thought and action in American politics and sort of the unique challenges that it faces. He's going to talk specifically about, sort of the theory of socialism, Marxism, Leninism. It's the sort of historic problems that kind of analysis encountered, and how it might offer some solutions to the current political challenges we confront. And this is a subject that often doesn't get discussed in contemporary political analysis on podcasts and in commercial media. So the whole question of socialism and Marxist thought, and how does that relate to current day electoral politics and the problems between Democrats and Republicans. So it's going to be interesting to hear some of John's thoughts about that, and maybe I'll get a chance to ask him some questions about that too. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our esteemed scholarly co-host, Jonathan Brown, to talk about Marxism and how it relates to some of the challenges we're facing right now in the current day politically.
Well,
So John, why don't you talk a little bit about
the big question, that I was looking at was, I started off doing a lot of research into some public opinion polls of popularity of, the term socialism, communism, things like that, or capitalism. And of course, Americans, if you look at, most polls, Americans don't like communism. They don't like socialism. And that's been a case, for the Cold War. We've had the Red Scare, where socialists and communists were systematically persecuted and, chased out of every institution in American society. We have the culture industry, the media has demonized socialism as evil, and the government and the education system. But there's this contradiction that I really wanted to show with some polls. Yeah, well,
I don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to interrupt you.
no, 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 no.
But can you outline for us, for the listener, what is it about socialism and communism that the sort of hegemony, the hegemony of political, social, and cultural life hate and talk about as evil? What specific attack? What is the attack or line about communism and socialism? Why do they hate it? Why?
Well, communism and socialism is probably the most misunderstood terms in political discourse, because it's sort of just a boogeyman. Like, people in my generation grew up hearing more than socialist. We probably heard like terrorist as this scaremonger that the government would use to justify invading a country and saying, "Oh, we got to kill these terrorists." Back in the 50s and 60s, it was, we're going to go to war to stop the communists. And it sort of was an empty term because it simply meant, anyone that you disagreed with. But the reality is that the American government that is owned and controlled by a handful of private, wealthy corporate interests fears communism and socialism, because communism is about creating a government of, by, and for the people, for the general welfare of the American people. And they don't want the American people to feel like we can have a society where our government and our economy is run for the good of the people. They want us to live in a world where the government and the economy works for the private profit of the few, while the millions and millions of Americans struggle to survive. So they have to demonize this idea of communism to make it bad, because then Americans, we know that America has problems, but we think, well, communism must be worse. We can never have a solution. There's never an actual socialist answer to the problems. And that's kind of the first thing I wanted to point out is, if there's a fascinating poll that is done every year by Gallup. Gallup, when I was a sociology grad student, Gallup opinion poll is the kind of one of the leading sociology research institutions that does public opinion. And this is one they've been
Right. So
doing for
blue,
years.
yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This one is called confidence in institutions. So they ask American people, how much do you trust each institution of American society? And the fascinating thing here, in the latest year, I'm just going to go through some of these. You have the church, organized religion. Only 17% of Americans have a great deal of trust in the church. The military, 34% have a great deal of trust in the military. Only 13% trust the Supreme Court. 12% trust the banks. 13% trust the public schools. 7% trust the newspapers. And 4% trust Congress, right? So we can keep going, but you get the picture, right? In American society, the American people completely have no faith in any institution. We looked at religion, government, business, media. There is no trust in any of the major structures or institutions or bureaucracies in our society, in American capitalist society. But at the same time, we also say, well, we don't like socialism. We don't want socialism, but we don't trust capitalism either. So to me, that's sort of a sign that there is this basic understanding that most Americans have that our system isn't working. There's some sort of crisis, that the American capitalist system is not working for the people. The churches, the organized religions aren't working, the government isn't working, the media is not working, the businesses aren't working. So there is a widespread discontent, or you might say a dissatisfaction or a crisis of legitimacy that these institutions face. And I think that, in my opinion, is leading us to a position where socialism is now, for the first time in decades, becoming sort of rehabilitated among young people. So yeah, so I don't know. So I've been talking for a bit. So what are your
No,
thoughts?
I was going to say, John, this particular form of analysis is so brilliant. I just can't tell you because you, well, on the one hand, the lack of confidence or using confidence as the measure leads to the ability of Donald Trump and what is it, Elon Musk, to say, well, okay. No one has any trust in anything, any of these programs, any of the institutions, any of the governmental bureaucracies. Let's
That's right.
just rip it all up and privatize the whole damn thing.
That's right.
And so
That's exactly right.
on the one hand, but the where your analysis really becomes really has influenced my own thinking is when you have comparative polls in so-called the communist states like the People's Republic of China, where confidence levels are extremely high in their authoritative or governmental institutions. So that's a stunning comparison.
Right.
Where again, for all the talk, and again, I wanted to, also return to my earlier question, which is why the scare about communism? Why do people distrust it? Well, just to make the argument, it's viewed in liberal democracies or liberal societies as a authoritarian system that it lacks it lacks constitutional, political, and civil protections. There's no democracy. It lacks free elections. It's a dictatorship of the proletariat, which means it's a dictatorship. And you can't criticize the government. You do not have rights to free speech. You don't have free elections where anyone can say what they want and think what they want. In other words, it's a authoritarian system. Other attacks on communism is it's like a religion, and you can't. Marxism is like a religion, and you can be taken away and put in a gulag if you don't agree with the religious concepts of it. And then you have examples like Pol Pot in Cambodia, where there were these killing fields, and when communists take over the society. So that's the rap against communism and socialism in a nutshell. I kind of wanted you to address that as well. But using confidence levels as a measure is methodologically, I think, brilliant, and it shows you the problem.
Yeah.
What do you?
Do you want me to address
Yeah.
the confidence level or the authoritarian argument?
Well, I think they're both important. I did want you to address the argument that communism is an authoritarian system that is anti-democratic somehow or contrary to democratic values, and that's why liberals hate communism.
Yeah, so I would say
And then
communism.
also confidence level next, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll try to answer both of them at the same time because I think they're connected. I think that
Okay, good,
uh,
good.
communism, I think, is I would just say I think communism is more democratic than what we have in Western capitalist countries. What the difference is that there's a balance. They try to balance this contradiction between authority and democracy in a way that is necessary because communist states. Now we know from the history of the Cold War and the history of the war on terrorism that any country in the entire world that attempts to nationalize its own, oil supply or nationalize its own farms or something, immediately the CIA will go in, overthrow that government, and institute a coup or bomb them to pieces like we did with Vietnam, and then install a US backed dictatorship that allows our oil corporations or our United Farm Company to come in and plunder and loot all of their natural resources. So, in order to prevent a
Yeah,
communist, yeah, and in order to
go
prevent
ahead.
a socialist government from being overthrown, it is unfortunate reality that this is necessary. There has to be a state. There has to be rules and authority to prevent uh, both external threats from Western imperialist powers from overthrowing them, and also from within. The governments like the CIA are not just trying to bomb them and invade them, but they're also funneling money into these countries to create discontent from within to get them to overthrow the government in Western backed coups, which nowadays we refer to this as a color revolution, which is a fake revolution that's backed by the CIA. So, like, look for example at Venezuela. Venezuela, people will always point out it's a dictatorship. They have a bad economy. Well, Venezuela has been under sanctions for decades by the United States. They have hundreds of sanctions that have absolutely crippled their entire economy. And so we've also been financing revolutions to try to overthrow their government. So if you're a country that's trying to survive this onslaught, this siege, this warfare from the most powerful military on the planet, you have to sort of have a strong military to defend yourself to survive. Otherwise, your government's going to be overthrown. The any gains that you have made as a socialist country for the people will instantly be overthrown, and this brutal dictatorship that does the bidding of Western imperialists is going to be put in, and will just allow multinational corporations and foreign banks to come in and loot the country dry. So the reality when we talk about these authoritarian countries, the authority of those countries is entirely a function of the fact that those countries are under siege. And if they were not being attacked and threatened, there would not be any need for any sort of authority measure in place. But the other side of it is that the democratic measure. Now, in China, they use a contradiction. They call it the people's democratic dictatorship, and they use that facetiously to say that we have the Chinese Communist Party, and that's our dominant party. But within that party, we have full electoral democracy for the people. And because the Chinese government is delivering advances for the people, then it has popularity and trust among the people. So that if you were living in China and 40 years ago you were poor and illiterate and you were basically a peasant, and today you're the second wealthiest country in the second largest economy in the world, then you're seeing your life get better and the economy improving, poverty going down, life expectancy going up, technology increasing. So they're actually seeing better lifestyle, which gives them more confidence in their system. Whereas in America, over the past 40 years of deregulation and privatization and deindustrial shipping the jobs overseas and getting rid of our economy, people's lives have gotten worse. So we see in America, there's no confidence in our system because our system isn't working. Whereas in China, they're growing stronger. So, of course, logically, people are more confident in their government for that reason.
So So is it then the battle? It's sort of a historic question, and it's the
Yeah.
question we always ask, which is the battle with the owners of capital. In other words, the big corporations. Um, trying to reform the corporations or regulate the corporations through programs like antitrust or health and safety regulations, consumer regulations. Trump recently uh, successfully ended the Consumer Financial Safety Protection Board, and other regulatory, similar regulatory bodies. So you sort of have this, I guess, what you're saying is that the challenge is how do we either regulate, replace, or nationalize or take over these big corporations? How do we confront them? Can we do it through liberal democratic reforms like antitrust or labor unions and minimum wages and these sorts of programs, health safety regulations, or do we need to, in a sense, just end any political influence that these big corporations have on public policy through just basically banning their participation in political life, and
Yeah.
saying the only people that can participate in political life are the working classes or the masses, but corporations, wealthy individuals, owners of capital, they should not have a role in the political sphere. Is that the question we're facing? Like, how do we confront the power of capital or corporations? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, to put it just in American terms, the Constitution in the preamble, I believe it says that we're supposed to have a government of, by, and for the people. And it also says in there that the
Right.
government is supposed to serve the general welfare of the people. So the idea is if you have these large financial institutions, these multinational corporations, these giant monopoly banks that control the political process, then that's not a government of, by, and for the people. That is not a government that serves the general welfare of the American people. It's a government that is owned and controlled by a small handful of wealthy financial oligarchs. And that poisons any notion of democracy that we have. Because if to even run for office, you either have to be a multimillionaire or you have to be bought and paid for by other millionaires and billionaires and business interests, then you're not able to respond to the needs of the people. You're writing laws and regulating, laws based on what is good for the private interests of the few rather than what is good for the majority of the country. So I think socialism would be, it wouldn't necessarily say there can't be any markets or anything like that, because the difference would be that the market would not control the government. It would be the other way around, that the people, the democratic process of what is good for the majority of the country would use the market as a tool in order to generate wealth and create technology and provide us goods and services, but it would use that for the benefit of the people. Whereas today, it's the other way around. The people sort of are enslaved by the government that is controlled by the corporations. And I think that's backwards. We need a government that protects our interests, not the interest of the wealthy and powerful elite. And that's something that Americans are recognizing, because this poll I showed with the confidence in institutions, all those institutions are owned by private corporations, private business, big money, profit driven institutions. So we have a phenomenon where there is a rise of popularity among mostly younger people, but everyone, you know, who sees
Everyone.
socialism as being more palatable. Let's pull up this picture here. This one trend that me and you have followed Bernie Sanders for almost 10 years now. I mean, so the
Oh,
Sanders
right.
campaign, um, Bernie Sanders, what was remarkable about it? Well, even before Bernie, let's go back to there was the financial crisis, the housing market crash, there was this great recession in 2008. And
Right,
that opened the floodgates on the right
right,
and the left. You had the Tea Party on the conservative side, you had the Occupy Wall Street on the left. There were these more populist anti establishment groups emerging. And one side of that was Bernie Sanders, who he openly called himself a socialist, and he said we need a political revolution, we need to take down the billionaire class. And until he did that, I mean, it was unheard of for any politician to say those terms. But the fact that Bernie Sanders used that language and
right,
it didn't hold him back, but it actually he gained millions of followers. I think that is a sign that there is a sort of growing, um, public interest in maybe revamping the term socialism and communism in a positive way, because now people are sort of questioning, hey, maybe this whole capitalist system we have isn't working so well after all. But this article, it's sort of one of the flaws with the way Bernie Sanders has been doing it is that he sort of says a lot of good things and he criticizes oligarchy and the big corporations, but he always keeps us within the framework of like voting for the Democratic Party. So here his message is to push the Democrats to fight oligarchy. And there's a photo here with him and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and they're sort of rallying the people. They're getting these huge crowds. They're going around the country. This crowd in this picture was 30,000 people in Denver. And this is great that there's this many people interested in socialism and fighting oligarchy and things like that. But it's a bit odd to me, and I want to hear your opinion too, Will, that these are people that are trotted out every time there's a Republican in office saying fight oligarchy, vote Democrat. But then when Biden is in office, when the Democrats are running, they sort of tamper down and they do the bidding of the Democrats, and they play like, hey, we're going to vote for the oligarchy, we're going to campaign for the oligarchy so that they win the election, and then after that we're going to go back to saying let's fight the oligarchy again. So it's sort of leading people in a sort of down this endless path of Democrats and criticizing the oligarchs but then vote for the oligarchs. So it sort of leads us to sort of dead end conclusion. So I don't know. What is your take on these new Bernie Sanders rally, and do you think that's a viable path forward?
well, a couple of things, and again, these are profound questions that we have to use care in terms of our analysis. A couple of things, just off the top of my head. First thing is, right now, it seems to be the only show in town. So if you're against oligarchy and you're against what's going on, you have this instant remedy. It's called the Democratic Party. It's Bernie Sanders and AOC, and the popular Democratic Party is going to now be suddenly a proper opposition party, and they're calling for reformist measures to combat the problems that we started talking about. Corporate control of all aspects of our life. And this can be achieved through reform, but how can it be achieved with reform if, we've come to this point where with Trumpism and the destruction of just about every reformist institution in government being undertaken by the MAGA movement, because they have failed. They have failed to reform the ills of the system and the contradictions, meaning affordability crisis and the cost of housing and food, and the growing severe poverty in America, with homelessness emerging as a major problem and so forth. The contradictions have achieved such heights that reform doesn't work. If it's taught us anything, that reform doesn't work. And as you point out, the confidence in our reformist institutions are gone, completely gone. And so here comes
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders and AOC coming back and saying, oh, no, 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 we can reform and reform and reform, and we have a Democratic Party, and it can be a wonderful party, and let's all become Democrats, and we'll vote out the Republicans and the Democrats, which are thoroughly corrupted, and
Well, and can I just add? Can I
the
just
confidence
add?
in the Democrats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and in that article that we pulled up, it says that the Democratic Party's popularity in opinion polls is at an all-time low since it hasn't been this low since the year 1990. It's only about 27% of Americans have any confidence in the Democrats. Now,
Well, there you go.
Trump and the Republicans are not popular either, but this is Bernie Sanders and AOC looking at campaigning for the Democrats when the Democrats are at a historic crisis of popularity.
That's right. There's that problem. And then the other problem is the problem you and I always talk about, which is war must be the focus. And these Democrats, Sanders and AOC, these are warmongering Democrats. They support the military-industrial complex fully. They're strong-throated supporters of the war on the Russian Federation. The war on the People's Republic of China. They vote for these massive military budgets. Sanders is, to his, in fairness, he is a reformer. He said, well, we do need to reduce the military industrial, the budget, and he does criticize aspects of Israel's or the U.S. war on Palestine.
Yeah.
Um, but to be fair, these are warmongers, and this is a warmongering party. So no, but there's the other side of the problem, which is again that we talk about it. It's a problem we see reemerging with the MAGA and Trump movement, which is Sanders and AOC currently are the only show in town, the only game in town. There is no other, sort of major electorally focused movement being, promoting the alternative to MAGA and Trump. So what do we do? That's the question I would ask of you, John. What do we do? What is to be done
I was afraid you were going to
given
ask me
this?
that. I'm afraid you're going to
Yeah.
ask me that. I don't really know how to answer what to be done, but I mean, I feel like what Bernie and AOC is doing is not the right answer either, because, we've seen how that's going to work out. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
um,
we've been here before with Bernie Sanders over and over again.
over and over again. And so is it going to be any different? And even if we can say, yeah, that'd be good if they were able to implement some reformist measures, but they're still not going to challenge the actual war machine. They're not going to.
No,
So
they're not.
they're not really the answer. And I can only hope that if confidence in these institutions keeps growing more and more acute, that a actual sort of revolutionary
Yes.
situation will emerge. Uh, and that's the danger as well, that as confidence in the institutions continues to grow, uh, figures like Trump and Musk also gain appeal. And I think in this sense, though,
Well, they do, clearly.
they do. And the Sanders and the AOCs, if they were channeling that energy into building the American Communist Party, that was a truly anti-imperialist party that was not beholden to the Democrats, that would be a beautiful thing. But they're channeling it back into the two parties, the war machine, and I think that's the problem. They're not channeling it into a truly, anti-war alternative. They're channeling it back into the same system, and they're telling us, "Hey, trust us. This time the Democrats are going to be good." And we've seen it again and again and again every 4 years, and it's the same thing over and over. So until something emerges to
And
where
the public has no, yeah, and
until
the
something
public has no confidence in the Democratic Party.
yeah, so I think maybe the Democrats are going to try to rebrand themselves. They're going to have to if they ever want to survive. But will it be a superficial rebranding? I would say most likely. There's just no way that they're going to offer.
It has to be because the Democratic Party has a structure, and its structure is it's totally dependent on on money, on big money, whether it's dark money or wealthy individuals or PACs or military vendors or Wall Street or the medical industrial complex or the pharmaceuticals and on and on and on and on. It's the structure of the party. I don't think there really is a real quote unquote Democratic Party. It's not controlled by organized labor and so forth. It's just basically almost kind of a fake kind of mantle, with
Yeah.
no structural substance. that represents working people whatsoever. It's completely dependent on money. And so, you can have reformers emerge out of there. There always was a sort of a, what do you call it? A knight, a knight in shining armor would
Yeah.
come in to save the day for the Democratic Party, whether it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy or Barack Obama or
Yeah.
Bill Clinton,
Yeah.
knight in shining armor. Now it's Bernie Sanders and AOC, a new version of that, but it's the same old problem over and over again. Reform doesn't work. The confidence in the institutions have eroded, and you're right. We're going to need an alternative, but this is the question that we need to really figure out how that alternative gets established and do it.
Right. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. We're gonna, I mean, we continue, discussing these points and trying to brainstorm what we can do. But right now, we've offered I think we've offered a convincing, critique and analysis of the problem, and it's time will
Yeah.
tell
And
what.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank
Yeah.
you, man. Thank you. Always, always a pleasure to
Yeah.
discuss this
Yeah.
stuff with you.
Yeah.
And if you in the
Yeah.
audience, if you guys like this, please subscribe to our channel. Send us a message, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you guys have any ideas, what do you think the solution is to this conundrum we face with the Democrat and Republican duopoly? And how can we move beyond that, restore America, restore confidence in our society, rebuild? So send us a comment, leave us a message, like and subscribe our channel. And if you want to see more, we come on twice a week. We're the Praxis Report, where we're analyzing theory in order to build practice for a better world. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Brown.
And I'm your co-host, William Barth. All power to the people.
Power to the people. Peace, y'all.